All right. So what's going on here? Last video I made was on the Westcott Designs TRD Lift. I've had this on for, I think it's been about 4,000 or 5,000 miles, all good things. However, in my mind, I was kind of always wondering, what's the next step? Which is kind of funny because I'm not seriously off-roading this thing, but I am looking for a little bit more plushness. Now, the setup is not harsh in any way, but I would just like that extra level of comfort. Sometimes people will say, you're looking for the caddy feel, Cadillac. I don't know what I'm looking for. This is my first pickup truck, but I am looking for something that will just absorb the road imperfections just a little bit better. Still happy, still would recommend the Westcott, but I'm still looking for more. I guess that's one of my problems. I'm constantly kind of thinking and overthinking and just thinking what's next, Anyhow, my friend was looking for the same lift. He offered me a great price for my assembled setup, and we'll swap it into his truck. And, he said, why don't you take a look at the new Fox setup? This was just released fairly recently. They got the remote reservoirs. It should be a more plush ride, and they have the dual speed control, the DSC. You can adjust the high and low speed. You can read more about that. You can watch some more videos. I'm not fully versed on what these offer, but I think they'll be a good solution to my needs. I'm starting with the front today. This is what the coilover looks like. It comes preset. This is the preload collar. It's actually on the top with a 2.5 inch lift. I gained 3 inches with the Westcott lift, so I want to get close to that. I did need to use a spring compressor and adjust the preload collar down 1/4 inch, and they said that's good for 0.5 inches of lift. I should be at 2.75 with this current setup. So we'll see. I mean, this is beefy stuff. Awesome kit. I'll get into that in just a moment. I'll walk you through what I do to get these installed. I only saw one other video of somebody installing these, and it looks like he was also taking out a spacer collar lift, but the guy on the video never really followed up. Most of us need some seat time before we can really follow up and give us our feedback, but really cool design here. It looks like they have one, I guess they call it 2.5 inch shock body, and they use it in different applications, probably use a different spring rate. But you can tell it's really beefy, really cool. What's interesting about this kit, even though it only came with 2.5 inches of lift, 2.25, it includes like a sway bar, these sway bar blocks essentially, and I think it lowers the position of the sway bar or optimizes it. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm surprised Westcott doesn't have something like that. Curious why they do or why they don't. I don't see this with other companies, but I'll get into that. These are the brackets for the remote reservoirs that holds, these collars hold the reservoir itself. And there's some bump stop spacers, which is something that I've seen in the other kits too. So a lot of extra hardware, but really these come pre-assembled, again, only for 2.5 inches of lift, which had me scratching my head because I know if it comes assembled like that from the manufacturer, that's probably the best case scenario in terms of ride. Adding preload is only gonna make it stiffer. So already I'm questioning, hey, did I make the right choice? But we'll see. On the rear, I don't have that in front of me. I don't have it opened up yet. I'm just doing the fronts this afternoon. It's not a coilover. You have to buy the springs separately, and I got the iBox spring. So I'll get into that in a little bit. It's hard to measure the ride height before, and obviously this has a few thousand miles. It's hard because the tire, the new 35s, they stick out. I haven't made a video on these. It looks absolutely badass. It's awesome. But what I did was I just measured from the tire to the bottom lip of this fender, and I'm at 6 1/8 on the front and 7 5/8 on the rear. So over an inch, like an 1.5 inch difference between front and rear, which is pretty interesting. Doesn't quite look like that. There is a rake, but it doesn't look like it's 1.5 inches. So all I put in on the rear was the Westcott Designs spacer on the spring. I got new iBox springs, which are good for 1.1 inches of lift over stock. So curious where that gets us. I want to retain a similar height, but I'm okay with it if it's, 1/2 inch difference. I just figured I would preload and I would space it and get up a little bit higher from the factory, but I'm not maxing it out at 3 inches, which is the highest they recommend to go. So we'll see what goes down. Yeah, stay tuned. Okay, got the front assembly out. Again, that's the TRD strut with the Westcott lift. Pre-collar, no spacer up top. I wasn't running the spacer. You can watch a little bit more about that on the other video, but you can see it's hard to tell. The overall height looks pretty similar on both of these pieces. They're just set up completely differently. You can see the spring almost like sits lower positioning, but doesn't really mean anything, just a different design. So we'll get this new one in and see how things go. All right, got this slipped in. This is seemingly thicker, maybe. It was a little bit hard to slip it in from the bottom, like the Westcott way, where you drop the whole lower, those spindle bolts down below. And if you watch the other video, that's how I kind of swung down the whole lower control arm and extracted it from the bottom, put it back in. This was a lot tighter. You definitely need some help getting that reservoir through. The Fox way, if you look it up, they're taking off these, the tie rod ends, and then the upper control arm, and kind of doing it a little bit differently, but I just stuck with what I knew and it was fine. This is those Fox spacers that they include, sway bar bracket spacers, effectively lowering the sway bar position, I suppose. We'll see how that clears the front air dam. I don't think it will. Might need some trimming, just need to remove that. To my surprise, they have the reservoir bracket mounted to the same bolt that holds that spacer. So as you can see, this is gonna need a little trim to fit the reservoir there. No other way. So we'll get to that. This is the finished driver's side. Reservoir got mounted. There's a piece of plastic that needs to get trimmed behind this, and then we just tuck the liner back in here. And it gets mounted on a bracket with these straps that go on, they get sandwiched between the spacer for the front sway bar. But that's the final positioning of the reservoir on the driver's side. Everything went back together smooth. Honestly, this was super easy to slip on because you're dropping the sway bar positioning. It no longer felt like we had to jack it up or put it into position. It literally just kind of slipped on. So kind of digging this this relocation kit essentially. It's just a spacer, but it makes sense and it acts as a bracket. So far so good. Passenger side is all wrapped up. Same process on this side. Plastic gets cut away, liner got tucked in there. You have full adjustment, full access to everything. Everything went smooth, and we'll get it dropped down, tackle the rear another time. Okay, here's the rear kit. It's not a full coilover kit because in the rear, the spring and the shock assembly are two separate pieces. So what you get in the Fox kit, and there's two versions of the Fox kit, of the 2.5 Elite for the Tundra. There's one that is good for 0 to 1.5 inch of a lift. And then there's the same kit that includes extended brake lines, which is interesting because the Westcott kit lift did include a bracket just to move the brake line in a more favorable position. This kit does not include it as long as you're going between 0 and 1.5 inch lift. And so I decided to stick with this one because I didn't want the rear to come up too high. It just doesn't really make sense. If the front lift is only good for 3 inches, 2.5 to 3 essentially, the rear for me, I didn't need any more than 1.5 because with the Westcott lift, I got a little bit over 1 inch. So they include some remote, brackets for the remote reservoirs, and of course some clamps and some screws. I'll show you how that all lays out, but check out these bad boys. These are noticeably, of course, just like the front, I mean, just really beefy, really thick assembly. They've got a boot, which is nice. The factory, I think the ones they have also like a sleeve. I'll show you that before I remove it on the TRD ones and the factory Bilstein one. But you have to get the springs separately. So essentially you kind of match it up to however you are setting up your vehicle. And in some cases, it takes a few tries to get everything set up. I honestly just went off a whim and just ordered a rear spring that's good for about 1 inch height, and that's the iBox spring. iBox is a reputable company. There's a lot of other reputable choices. The spring is silver, matches the Fox. I just thought it was a good pairing. Didn't want the rear up too high. I'm not carrying any weight back there, except for a bike rack once in a while. So for me, it's no big deal. Go with a heavier pound spring or a spring made for more lift if you have a lot of weight, like a tent back there, or some gear, propane tanks, gas, whatever you're doing. So all depends on the specific situation, but this can always be changed out later pretty easily, so I'm not too worried. I think if you're looking for a super high lift, the Fox kit is probably not the one to get, because the front's only really good for about 3 inches. So I think that's perfect for me, and that's perfect for what I'm doing with it, but you might want to consider something else if you're looking for a really high lift. So personally, I went with the kit without the extended brake lines, and I think this is going to be perfect. I'll compare the shock lengths, and we'll just get a quick view of how everything looks before I mount it up, and we'll get to the rear in just a moment. Okay, before we get started, did about a 60 mile commute, and we went up actually from 6 1/8 to 6 5/8. Again, measuring just from the bottom of the fender flare to the tire. So a 1/2 inch difference there in terms of height gained. Kind of makes me question if I should have added preload to the Fox shocks. But I don't want to judge the kit yet. The net result is positive for sure, but I want to have the rear set up before I judge the kit, and I need to put some miles on it. So far so good, definitely softer. I actually checked the dual speed compression valves. They're all set to wide open, which means full soft. Even though Fox states usually they do, I think, like 3 clicks from full soft, I double checked everything, and you need to use an Allen key to adjust the high speed. The low speed you can adjust whenever you want. So I loosened up the Allen keys and was able to get in there, make an adjustment. But yeah, I don't have a lot of feedback from other people that have used this kit and what their settings were and what springs they used. Everything's so dependent. Depending on where the rear ends up today, after a commute, I might make an adjustment to the front. I want it close to level, but I'm still going for that 1/4 to 1/2 inch higher in the rear. The rear is at 7 5/8, and you know, there's still an inch difference between the front and the rear right now as it sits. So kind of makes me wonder, depending on how the rear comes out, we'll see, and we'll go from there on if we're going to adjust the front, because technically, again, I added some preload and that is making it stiffer, and ultimately I'm looking for a really plush ride. So it's not to say I'm disappointed in any way so far. It is definitely better. I just want to fully let it set in, and we'll go from there. Okay, really quick. This is that TRD shock assembly. Same one in the TRD kit that Toyota sells, still made by Bilstein. The upside to this is that it has longer travel. I think it was like 1 3/4 inches or something. So pretty significant, which allows their spacer, which can't be seen, it's actually kind of tucked up in there, allows their spacer to essentially not crash. So when you're lifting up the suspension, you're lifting it, you want to have the proper amount of movement in that shock. So again, stock spring, this came on the off-road package, and all you're doing is upgrading the shock. You can get your choice of shock too. There's plenty of good ones out there. People say this is just a glorified, I think, 5100 kit by Bilstein, but who knows, maybe Toyota put their own spin on things. And again, you got the Westcott spacer, which isn't shown. I'll be removing the whole spring assembly and that shock, mounting up the external reservoir, and show you how it all looks and see what kind of lift we end up at. It'd be interesting to see if we come down a little closer in the rear, but I think I gained about 1 inch when I did this system in general from Westcott. So I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. Lots of unknowns here. And there's a chance I'll be touching the front again to adjust the preload, maybe to an ideal height to where I want it. But right now it looks pretty good. So let's hope it ends up here. Okay, I've laid out the rear pieces. The rear is really easy to get to. Just remove the shock, undo the sway bar. The Fox kit has you removing the sway bar mount, and that's where you kind of sandwich the bracket. Popped out a lot easier than it came in, I'll tell you that. It was a little tough to get these in with all the extra tension of that spacer. I saw in one video somebody actually used a spring compressor to compress the spring, putting it in. I'll see if I need to do that. The iBot kit has you swap over this lower the rubber protective layer is probably just to keep everything sounding compliant and not metal on metal. And you can tell that the new iBot spring is just slightly longer. It's obviously probably has completely different spring rates. But when you add on the Westcott spacer, it actually looks like the Westcott, the whole area is longer here. That doesn't mean much right now because clearly the springs are a little bit different, but just wanted to show the differences. And to my surprise, the TRD is slightly longer than the Fox. The Fox includes the new top mount bushings, new hardware. Definitely interesting. But you can see the orientation of the Fox is different on the rear. And it's probably due to the way the external canister reservoir works. Okay, the rear is successfully installed. Reservoir bracket sandwiches underneath the sway bar bracket. Little tight. Definitely an interesting setup the way they have it. So you kind of have to reach in and you can make adjustments here if you want, but at least it's right there. You can just look under. Again, the shock length was shorter, so it was actually easier to put this in. It does not need a brake line extension with these shocks. I assume that the other kit that has the extended brake lines probably has a longer shock. But again, since I'm only looking for about an inch and a half lift at the most, no plans to go any higher than that. There's just no reason to get the other kit. So simple and straightforward. I removed the Westcott bracket that extends the brake lines, which is like this. Some of the Westcott parts that will be going into my buddy's car. And yeah, it's all ready to go. Just gotta lower it, torque everything down. The rear, much easier than the front. iBot springs fit in nice and easy. So good to go. Okay, here we've got my buddy's Limited, which the TRD suspension is going into today. I figure I put this in the video because I actually had a chance to drive this home. We traded trucks yesterday. He had some prior obligations today. So we traded, put about 60 miles on it. And I mean, right away, it was kind of validation about switching the suspension setup, and it was spot on. I couldn't imagine putting the Westcott preload collar or any other preload collar onto this lift. Of course it's going to ride poorly. It already rides poorly. It's got the longer axles because it's the off-road. It's got the red Bilstein suspension, but it is really, really stiff. It's in control. There's not a lot of body roll, but you feel everything. It's kind of jarring. And you feel kind of just the rear just follow the front, and it's, you know, once you hit a bumper, an imperfection, you just feel like an afterwave effect, like da 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 da. It's not good. It's harsh. It's not pleasant, to be honest with you. You feel everything in the road, even when you're driving. You just feel everything. So a huge step up in quality. A lot of people, you know, just have bad things to say, but most of them are not doing the TRD struts and the shocks. A lot of people are just doing the preload kit, and it's just not a good setup. Apparently, I don't have any experience with it, but I couldn't imagine it makes the ride any better. It makes the ride stiffer because it gives you lifts. You need the longer travel shocks to take advantage of that lift and have everything move without kind of crashing down, because this is obviously in need of a lift here. It's factory height, but you know, can't wait to throw on the TRD setup. Just wanted to say how much better it is. It's been about 5 months since I've been on the stock suspension. I kind of forgot how terrible it was until riding it now. So yes, definitely a step forward with the TRD. Okay, we just got back. Quick ride, make sure everything sounds right. There's no funky noises. TRD suspension got installed on this Limited. Again, I had some seat time with it for the last day. Kind of helped me reaffirm my choices here, but we just put this on, we went for a drive, and we both agreed it's better than stock. way better than the factory Red Bilsteins. You get the lift that you want. It's basically a 3-to-1 lift without any compromises. So everything's on a positive level, and it just seems like it's a natural progression upward. And it seems like the next step up is really going to these external reservoirs, which costs a few times more the price, 3 to 4 times more the price, depending on what you do, which system you go with. So you have to buy new springs, and this system is awesome. And I'll get some more seat time with this system versus the TRD system. But yeah, I had about 6,000 miles maybe on this setup, and it was always good. I was just curious about switching over, and I think the results will come in. It'll kind of come to me about how the overall feeling is at the end of the day. But let me put some miles on this and then get back to everybody once I've had it for a few weeks. Give a better review on how I feel about the final move to the Fox suspension, because the TRD suspension was really good, and you don't need to buy all those pieces that Toyota offers. Again, just the Westcott, TRD kind of put together kit, and it's pretty solid. So, but you can see this one has the TRD flares that have been painted, and going to be doing the same thing on my truck, kind of de-platinize it. But yeah, stay tuned.
Here are a few clips from the Outer Banks trip that we took over the summer. I had my son helping out. He was filming and just wanted to show the vehicle kind of in action and what was going on. The beach was smooth. We did stay in an area where the houses were accessible only by private road and sand and ditches and mud pits. It was a lot of fun. But we'd pull up to the beach in Corolla, unload for the day, and just have a lot of fun. Just got some action shots and showing off the setup here. Now, this is prior to removing a little bit of preload in the front and lowering the back, which I go over in the next clip. And this is how I had it set up for many thousand miles, and overall I was very pleased with it. But curiosity does kill the cat, and I go over that in the next section. But overall, everything's been holding up well. You can see right into this bed of this truck. So I did get those ARC splash guards for the front and rear, and I think that did make a nice difference. But this truck is awesome, especially for family outings like beach days or car camping. We had a lot of fun over the summer. We packed it all up. Honestly, what's interesting is that the truck always felt better with a little bit of weight on it. When the family's loaded up and all the gear's loaded up, it feels almost more compliant in my opinion. But I love the stance of the setup. This was when it was a little bit taller in the front. I still think it looks really good. I go over that in the next clip. A half inch is really not that much. You can barely tell, but it makes a little bit of a difference. But this is the kind of roads that we are experiencing in the Outer Banks, in these private communities. It was a lot of fun though. Overall, the Fox suspension does hold up really well for this kind of terrain. Obviously, this isn't hardcore off-roading. It's literally just beach driving and cruising around. So tons of fun. Highly recommend it. But yeah, just wanted to show you guys the trip and what we were doing. So hope that was nice for you.
All right, here we are, skipping right to the end. If you made it through the video, thank you very much. I've got a lot to say, as always, and I'm just sharing my thoughts, just being real with you guys. It is now January 2025. I installed this system in the summer of 2024. I believe it was about early July. And I didn't want to post up a quick review, just say everything felt good, because there's definitely a placebo effect between spending money and thinking you're ending up at the place where you want to be, thinking that you're satisfied. And I think you guys kind of understand by now I'm a hard person to please, and I'm always thinking should I have gone a different way? And to be honest with you, if there was some more serious kind of shops around here that I knew of, I would probably have discussed more what my plans were with them and what my expectations are. But I think suspension is one of those things where it's very personal. Everybody will have a different opinion. regarding harshness, how soft something is, how compliant the suspension is, depending on what they're coming from or what their expectations are. Now, it's true, I really don't take this thing off-roading a lot. Did a few light off-roading trips, did a few sand trips on the beach. You know, we do that every year. It's been really solid. It's been a lot of fun, but I don't need a very serious suspension. I wanted a little bit of lift, but I didn't want to compromise. And I wanted something that is in control and compliant for daily driving, but also can handle trails and some off-road terrain pretty well. Now, the previous clips right before this, you guys saw, I was at the beach. Everything was pretty good. That was the setup I ran for a while, and then curiosity kind of got the best of me. And one day I decided, what if I take out a little bit of the preload that I added, regrettably, on that Fox kit. If you remember, the Fox kit comes preset from the factory where they build it. And I added a 1/4 inch of preload, which lifted up the front end, okay? More than the way that they have it set up. Now, adding preload does increase the stiffness, and therefore, you know, it just kind of, you know, for me, I didn't really want the stiffness. I really wanted a plush, compliant ride. And it's not to say that it wasn't, but I was still curious. So one day I decided to see if I could handle it. I was able to detach the upper control arm, lift it up out of the way, and I was able to actually get the spring compressor on it without removing the whole assembly, which was quite amazing. It still took a little bit of work, but I was able to thread that collar on the Fox suspension and remove some of the preload. So I went back to the original settings, essentially. Apologize, the car is really dirty. But the components have been holding up well in the Northeast, and from all the driving that I've been doing, everything's fine. There's no rust developing. I'm satisfied with that. But I was able to adjust the preload. And I mean, instantly, that 1/2 inch of preload, that 1/4 inch of preload that resulted in a 1/2 inch of lift, the truck felt better. It really did. The front end got a little bit softer. And then of course, now my rear was sitting really high. And to be honest with you, we do a lot of things outdoors, camping, hiking, snowboarding, skiing, going to the beach. And that extra 1 inch lift in the rear, honestly, it kind of made it difficult to get back in there, especially for my wife. And to be honest with you, it was kind of like hard to load up the back of the truck. And I decided, all right, we'll lower the front end back to kind of where it should be, where it's sitting right now. And this is how I've had it for a little bit now. And I'll remove the Eibach rear springs, and I'm literally on the original spring and on the Fox 2.5 inch remote reservoir shocks in the back. So the rear is a stock height. The front, I believe, got lifted up 2.25 inches. It should be around stockish height. And I do have a little bit of rake. The front is a little bit lower than the rear, but you know, for all intents and purposes, I mean, for the purpose of this video, the truck is level, essentially. I think there's only about a 1/2 inch difference between the front and the rear. So it's able to be aligned properly. The truck is level, and most importantly, it's comfortable, and it's more daily driver friendly this way. I should have set it up this way from the beginning, and I've kind of calmed down. I kind of don't need this tall lifted truck. That's why originally when I set up the TRD suspension, from Westcott with TRD shocks, it was so tall, and it was cool for a little bit, but it was just too much. I wasn't looking for that much, you know? But I think this still looks good. It's not extremely lifted, but it looks kind of like OEM Plus, which is where I fit in, you know, to the picture of most things. I think it looks really good, and yeah, this is where it's been at. I don't think I'm changing the suspension anytime soon. I'm happy with it. It's compliant. I think the biggest thing with this suspension is that it's even more, because it's adjustable, you have a lot of different opportunities. If you want to change the weight that you're carrying on the vehicle, you can adjust the stiffness of the shocks, and for different conditions you can adjust. Now, I haven't been making adjustments. I'm running at full soft and I'm happy with it. It feels good. When and if I tow, I can set the rear a little bit stiffer, and that should help with the sag. But overall, I'm very satisfied with the suspension. It is a big jump to the TRD / Westcott combo that comes with the TRD shocks and the Westcott pre-collar kit and the spacer for the rear, which I highly recommend that setup. If you haven't seen that video, check in our videos on Lightwerkz. That's a great setup for the money. And I'm told that the iBox Stage 2 kit is pretty awesome by a local customer, and I've seen really good feedback on that as well. So, and that's a much more budget-friendly kit. You know, the Fox kit is expensive, so people naturally will have high expectations, but fully satisfied with the Fox system. And in my opinion, you guys should just run it like this out of the box. You shouldn't increase the ride height unless you have a need to do so. So to me, this is how the truck should have came in terms of the ride height. It's a truck. It's at a little bit of a higher point than stock, but it doesn't look crazy, you know. Overall, I'm very pleased. But if you guys have any questions, leave a comment below, reach out to us. If you guys need anything done, installed, lighting, you know, reach out to us. Chances are we can help you. Radar detectors, dash cams, lighting. We do some suspension work. Feel free to reach out and we can discuss, you know. But thanks for watching this video. I know it's long and it's been in the making. I mean, I put in like 10,000 miles and I've got about 6-7 months on this suspension setup. So I wanted to wait to conclude the video. I was going to do it after the summer, and then I just kind of got carried away, and I was like, all right, let me do a 10,000 mile review on the Fox suspension, and I'm pleased. There's no leaks from the suspension, not that there should be, but I've heard some horror stories. I've heard some different things. I've got those arc splash guards installed. The truck is dirty, yes, but the suspension's been solid, and I'm very pleased with everything from Fox. So thumbs up from me for the Fox suspension kit. Again, pricey, but you get what you pay for. I haven't been in a Icon or King setup, but I'm satisfied with this. So hopefully this helps somebody make a decision. But ultimately, I don't recommend increasing the preload unless you need to. A lot of people are concerned about leveling the truck. I think this is the way to go. Fox sells it without any kind of thing for the rear. You can match it up to your factory spring. In this case, I've left it just how Fox essentially sets it up out of the box. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's a long video, but hopefully it helps some people. All right, guys, subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you need anything. Be happy to discuss with you.